when I really go back a lot in history, several thousands of years ago, I go to also some non-Western countries. I've been traveling also a lot, so I've seen quite a lot of different cultures. Interestingly enough is that most cultures use terms for meaning that are quite holistic. So when you look at some of the old Vedic texts, when you look at Taoism, when you look at Ikigai, the concept in Japan, or what in Germany and the Netherlands, how we call that Sinn or Zin. These are all terms which historically and from an etymological perspective mean like that your full body is engaged, like that it's more about perceiving, but it's also not only cognitive, that's the main thing. However, in English, we actually have only really one term that really works. And that's the word meaning. And with the word meaning, and also the way how we often use it, it's a much more superficial thing. Because it's very much about, actually like in countries like Germany or the Netherlands, meaning, which actually comes from the word Meinung or meaning, that means something much more like, it's just your opinion. So it sounds almost like random, subjective, almost something you can control, something you can just change today or tomorrow. Whereas all those other cultures and times, they had a totally different concept of meaning. And I think that how we nowadays use the term meaning in English actually has to do with a more recent history in our modern Western countries. Because this is the Middle Ages where people, when they were actually born somewhere on a certain point on the ladder of society and of the cosmos. So totally at the lowest rank. There were the animals and nature, the trees. Totally at the highest, you can see that there's God, there are the kings, and there's the clergy. And when you're born a peasant, you're born usually somewhere there. You're born there, and that's just your place. And that's like how it was until quite recent, until the Middle Ages. So when you speak about meaning in that period, it's much more fulfilling the social role and expectations that society had from you. And you would not really ask yourself, what's the meaning of my life? That was a ridiculous question, because it was simply like that you simply do what you're expected to do, the place that you were expected to have. But you know that during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, this idea of a ladder totally collapsed. And what happened is we became very skeptical. And then we started to think, well, meaning is actually something that's very biosocially determined. So it's much more social Darwinist idea about, it's just a battle of the fittest meaning, you know. It's just like the influence from commercials, from the church, from a social context, that just tells us randomly almost what is meaningful in our lives. And this is an idea that has been very dominant since Enlightenment. And this gives actually like a quite flat idea about Earth. Or a very flat idea about meaning, like a flat Earth. Because it's like, it can be any meaning, it's almost random, it's not really something high, something... No, it's much more, you can just explain everything technically. So the idea that a lot of people have nowadays about meaning is that it's something that's kind of random. If one type of meaning doesn't work, just pick another one, just do something else. So it's a very functionalist idea. And so it's almost like when you're going to the stores, that you can actually buy instant meaning, you know, that you can go to the store, that you get it from the shops, that you can get it from the shelves. And that's also why there's so many retreats, there's so many books like 7 Steps to Big Success, 7 Steps to a Meaningful Life, etc. There's so many books, self-help books on that. The idea that you can make meaning yourself. And there's also the idea like, just do anything that's meaningful for you, whatever that is, but also do it just to the maximum. But whatever you do, we can just change it, it's random, but do it to the max. That seems very much how we seem to be thinking about meaning. However, when we really think back about where we come from historically, where we have a much more holistic idea about meaning, and then we have ended up here, like, that's a very specific way of thinking about meaning. So, what you also see is at the same time, is during the 20th century, there is a new idea about meaning, where actually personal meaning is neither totally that idea about the ladder from the Middle Ages, but it's also not so random or superficial as the modern meaning, but it's something different. It's like a third option almost. And this is what I call climbing in the mountains, because it's very much like when we just go into our own experiences, there is a reason, and there is a hierarchy in our experiences between what's meaningful, what's less meaningful. So this is very much the idea about a combination of listen to your intuition. So listen to, well, is this meaningful, is this less meaningful? And also being very critical. And so in this way, it's possible to be critical about what's meaningful, what's less meaningful, but still listen to that. And that is also a very embodied experience. There's much more than only that cognitive thing or only that very superficial. But I think that this will become much clearer when I'm going to give all my examples. But this is like the theoretical background where actually like meaning-centered therapy comes from. So this is a little bit of the history about meaning in life. And then at the end of the 19th century, there was something weird going on. People started to help each other by talking. And that's called psychology, psychotherapy, talking therapies.